Hello again, my name is Steve Hillis, and this is the second in a series of videos on conflict theories or the conflict perspective. In this particular video, we're going to look at what I call conflict logic and the closely connected point that many conflict theorists argue that social conflict shapes the social world in a wide variety of ways. That basically the way the social world works, the way it operates, the way it looks, in large part reflects underlying social conflict and differences in power between large groups of people. Let's start out with conflict logic. Conflict logic, well, that's a term I made up. But I'm using it because it compares nicely to this idea of functionalist logic that we talked about earlier. Let's take a step back. Recall that functionalist logic is based on an assumption. The assumption is that if you look at some persistent pattern of behavior, large-scale pattern of behavior, it's there for a reason. Otherwise it wouldn't exist or it wouldn't persist. If lots of people keep getting married, then there's something about marriage that contributes to the welfare, the survival of society as a whole. Somehow, marriage has positive consequences for society, otherwise it wouldn't exist. Now, the underlying assumption is that marriage, or any other persistent pattern of activity, is something that benefits everyone, or at least most of the people, most of the time. It's a win-win game. Everyone, regardless of their race, their income, their wealth, regardless of their gender, regardless of their age, ultimately benefits by having things like marriage or any other persistent pattern of activity that we observe. Now notice that's a pretty radical assumption, and it's one that may or may not be true. But it's an assumption that functionalists often make in doing their analysis of a wide variety of social issues or topics. We're going to compare that with conflict logic. Conflict logic looks out at the social world and it too suggests that, well, things exist for a reason, but a very different reason than posited by functionalists. When a conflict theorist looks out and sees something like marriage, they think, well, it exists because it benefits somebody, some powerful, influential group of people. But it probably hurts other groups of people too. It's a dog-eat-dog world. It's a win-lose world. The social world is organized in such a way that it reflects the underlying conflict and power struggles that go on constantly. The social world is organized in such a way that it benefits some people while it hurts other people. Well, let's take marriage as an example. If you're a functionalist, marriage might very well benefit the larger society in a wide variety of ways. It helps socialize children, and it helps people in their interpersonal lives. It gives us social and emotional support. It gives us a sense of purpose in life. It ties us to our family and to our larger community. It motivates people to invest in the future and to make long-term plans, and so forth and so on. If you're a functionalist, marriage is an institution that may very well, may benefit almost everyone, at least most people, most of the time. On the other hand, if you're a conflict theorist, you're going to ask who benefits and who loses. And you're typically going to make the assumption that groups of people that are, more powerful, more influential, are more likely to be the beneficiaries of the way that society is organized, the way it looks, the way it works. So, if you're looking at marriage, you're going to ask who benefits. Well, at least some feminists argue that primarily men benefit at the expense of women, or at least that's the way it's been historically. Now, I don't necessarily want to get into all the details of this argument. It's certainly a controversial argument. Some people believe it, some people don't. But the larger point here is that some people claim that marriage is an institution that serves the interest of men, a group of people who are more powerful historically, more political power, more wealth, more job status, more education, and so forth, at the expense of women. In essence, marriage is an institution that has allowed men to control women, to control their sexual reproduction, to basically use them as unpaid labor at home, to force them or in various ways manipulate them into staying at home, raising kiddies, while daddy does what he wants to do. In essence, using women as, well, almost as sex slaves or at least unpaid labor. Now, again, controversial stuff, but you know what? Conflict theory often is controversial because it posits a world in which, well, things work and look the way they do because they're allowing some people to get what they want only by hurting other people. Originally, I was going to do a different example. I was going to look at education, particularly college education, but I'm going to leave this one to the viewer. Try a functional analysis, how college educations might contribute to the better working society for everyone, rich, poor, black, white, men, women, for the larger society. And compare and contrast that with a more cynical, or at least more skeptical analysis that assumes that colleges work the way they do, look the way they do, because it serves the interests of some people and not the interests of others. You can begin by asking who benefits by having colleges and universities that work the way that ours work, and who is hurt by that. Here's a hint. I've heard conflict theorists repeatedly make the argument that our higher educational system really kind of reinforces the status quo. It benefits rich, powerful, well-organized groups of people while not serving the interests of people who are working class, and especially people who are poor. In essence, rich people send their kids to the best colleges, and they wind up getting the most advantages, the most opportunities, while poor people struggle to get their kids into colleges at all. And when they do get into college, well, a lot of times they don't graduate. And even when they do graduate, a lot of times they don't come out the other end with as much opportunities or as much benefits from a college education. Why is that? How does that work? And more generally, why do colleges and universities look and work the way they do? A conflict theorist is going to be much more skeptical, in fact, openly hostile to the assumption that colleges are organized in such a way to benefit the larger society. And they're going to begin with the question of who benefits and who is hurt, and they're going to usually assume that the people who benefit by the way that colleges work are going to be people who have more power.